Okay, we're going to get started. So I'm Lucy Duncan. I'm the Director of Friends Relations, and I welcome you all to this training. This is the second time we've done a webinar on bystander intervention training, which we think is a really key and core needed skill right now because of all of the street harassment, all of the oppression that's happening interpersonally and in public right now. We're really excited to be able to offer this training that was developed in collaboration with the People's Response Team from Chicago. So I want to start by talking about Sanctuary Everywhere. Sanctuary Everywhere is the idea that communities, that we as people on the street can keep each other safe. And bystander intervention training actually, for me, is a real vision of an alternative world in some ways, because if we walked around our days, understanding ourselves as elementally connected with other people and elementally needing to take action to protect and care for other people, whether that was stopping harassment or making sure other people were fed, or in other ways, if everyone walked around in the world that way, we would have a really different and transformed world. So bystander intervention is a way to demonstrate that in a really tangible way and to practice how to show up for other people when they're facing harm in public in particular. And Sanctuary Everywhere is a stream of work that includes bystander intervention training. It includes some of our Communities Against Islamophobia work. It includes thinking about how to interrupt police violence and police harassment. It includes support, obviously, for immigrants, because the term sanctuary came from congregational sanctuary, in which congregations take in an immigrant and protect them from deportation. But we really wanted to expand that idea and the community beyond that congregational sense of it to what if we had that sense everywhere where we were willing to protect each other. So, and Lori, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi friends, I'm Lori Fernald Kamala. I work in North Carolina with our North Carolina Immigrant Rights Program and also coordinate our National Sanctuary Everywhere program, where I'm very lucky to be able to work with Lucy and many other folks in our healing justice, our immigrant rights work, and Communities Against Islamophobia work.
Yeah, and I'm really grateful that Lori is presenting. She's really skilled with this particular training, and it's great to have her do that. All right, so let's get started. Let's see. Hopefully I can move this. All right, so here is the goals of the bystander intervention training. This is the image up on the right is the image of the cover of the manual that we use, which is, as I said, it was produced by the People's Response Team in Chicago. And they have a cop watch training, I believe, also. But this manual is really, really good. And we would encourage you not only to experience what we're going to show to you tonight, and then you'll also get a recording, so you could share the recording as well, but to take the manual and teach it to one another, because there's no substitute for trying this on the fly in person and really embodying it. You're going to get a lot from this webinar, but we also want to encourage you to take that and use it. It's a very well written manual, and it's easy to follow. So you could go and do it with a meeting or whatever group that you happen to be connected with. So the workshop goals are to provide resources and tools, to offer space to practice. So I really appreciate the volunteers that have said that they're willing to do the role plays. And one piece of our commitment is to love and protect one another. So this is really about that vision that I was talking about, and this is a way to be very pragmatic about that vision, to have the skills so that instead of not knowing what to do when something happens, you really have practiced it, have thought about it, and have some idea of what to do in the face of street harassment or other kinds of racist acts. It's really important to stay really grounded and listen to your body in these situations. Your body's going to give you lots of clues about how to respond, and in these situations you'll have you would more likely have experience of kind of time slowing down, so that you can breathe and really look around and be very alert and make really good decisions about how you might respond in that. Again, this training was produced by the People's Response Team, and there's the link to the manual, but we'll also give you a URL at the end, and you can find all of these materials in one place. So go ahead, Lori.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks for grounding us in that, Lucy. And also just want to mention, along with this being a wonderfully useful practice, I think we also want to acknowledge that the tools that you'll gain through doing bystander intervention are not by any means all of the tools that we need to stop white supremacy in our communities and to stop all of the actions that are happening. But this is simply one more tool in your toolbox to intervene in interpersonal harassment. So we really want to help prepare you for those situations, and also acknowledge that we want to continue to work on systemic issues, even though this one is more targeted for individual circumstances. So I'm sure we've all been in situations where you may see something happening that you know isn't right, or maybe something just sits funny in your body. That you observe. So we want to talk about what are some of the biggest barriers to intervening. What barriers do you find? So people you can go ahead and write those in the chat, as many people are doing. Concerns for personal safety, fear of making things worse, having things escalate, getting shot in Florida. Several people have concerns for physical safety, being worried that it could make the situation worse for the person being targeted. If you have children, that's certainly another complication. You want to make sure that your children stay safe. It's hard to think fast enough to figure out what to do in real time. Absolutely. Fear that maybe you don't understand the situation, what's going on. Legal consequences. Anxiety. Not knowing what to do. Fear that intervention might make things worse. Knowing what the best response is. I think that all of these are, let's see anymore. Oh, maybe biased towards one of the parties. All of these are among the what we hear very commonly as some of the biggest barriers to intervening, especially fear of making things worse, fear of personal safety, and not knowing the situation and really not knowing what to say. Someone else is concerned about not trusting that you won't get emotional yourself. Knowing a challenge of confronting the source of the problem or the person being targeted. Others feel anger, tendency to polarize. Also, Quakers tend to have slow, seasoned reactions, which is good in some situations, but not when you need to react in the moment. So yeah, these are all things that are very common reactions. I think we'll close out that question now. And I think that through this webinar and continued practice, some of those things you will be able to overcome. One being having some tips on what you can actually do.
So what keeps you remaining a bystander? This is related to the question that Lori asked, but what do you think keeps you from taking action? Obviously, these things are all barriers to, figuring out what to do, but are there other things that might get in the way of you taking action in those moments? Is there anything else that you can think of? And you already named quite a few, so if you don't have more, I think it's really important to say that all of the things that you bring up, they're very, as Lori said, they're very, very common. Many of them are very common. Freezing in fear, distance from the action. It's all hard to tell who is right and what is wrong. Not feeling I have the time to get involved. Denial, very good. This isn't really happening. Being older, somebody said, it's easier not to respond. I've seen in situations such as work where retaliation happens against the injured party when they are supported. Oh, that is really, really important. Minding your own business, to witness even if I don't intervene, just to witness. So you don't want to intervene, but they are watching. That's a really important thing to keep in mind, and we're going to talk about that more. systemic violence and racism, a sense that this is so big that I can't do anything, I can't do enough, feeling overwhelmed, and one of my reaction comes out of my own prejudice. Wow, these are all really, really great because we're socialized in certain ways, and in moments of crisis or moments that are tense, we may operate out of our socialization. That's why it's really important to practice and think about this and sort of get your body ready to respond to these things. Thanks very much. I'm going to pass it back to Lori.
Thanks. So we're going to go back to the chat again with another question. How do you know when a situation requires intervention? You all have already listed a lot of the things that prevent us, and that sometimes we don't know if what's happening, we don't know what the situation requires. Okay, so if Rebecca says, if it is making me uncomfortable, that's how you know that it requires intervention. If it's cringeworthy or appalling, when the power differential is out of proportion. When one party is looking around for help, great one. We'll get to some key things around that in a minute. When the person being targeted seems scared or vulnerable. Bullying. When there is violence. Yeah, and those are all really, really excellent examples if you see someone feeling scared. Yeah, well, abusiveness. When the perpetrator is escalating out of control. So yeah, certainly if you can see an escalation. When you yourself start to feel scared. When the comment is obviously racist, sexist, Islamophobic, etc. Yes, it's definitely a difference if there's a very obvious comment versus some of the more subtle instances. If the victim is unable to defend themselves, or when there is more than one person attacking just one person. Okay, great, thanks. I think let's move on, Lucy.
All right, so the next thing, we're going to do one more thing in chat, and then we're going to start from these thoughts, we're going to sort of provide some context and some responses and answers of how to do it instead. So and part of this is, what would you like done if you were being harassed? How would you feel supported? So share what you would like. Like if somebody is, oh, I see that somebody said someone has a weapon. That's a really important one. We'll talk about that. So what if you were being harassed, what would you want somebody to do? And just go ahead and put that in the chat. What would be supportive? How honest are we being? Yes. Help create physical space between me and the person hassling. Stand beside me. To just have someone speak for me and try to keep me from harm. To stand next to me and hold my hand. Someone nearby starting a conversation with me. Help us have a conversation instead of a battle. Redirect the harasser. Come closer to me physically, someone coming alongside me, speaking up so that I know I'm not alone, a quick verbal response, to throw down with me if necessary, someone near me who can stay calm, really important, physically moving toward me and maybe putting their arm around me to showing support. Great, these are all really great answers. I would want someone to make contact with me, come to my side. So the commonality is really feeling like you're not alone. You want somebody to do something so you don't feel alone facing this really difficult situation. And that if people see that happening to you, you're not gonna get abandoned in that situation. That somebody that is maybe a stranger would stand up for you. Someone who's like the harassed in identity, telling the person to cut it out, harassed or not harassed. That's very good. So that's a real important thing to talk about allies and who can intervene in certain situations. It's really important to think about social location in this process, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more as we go along. Someone to respond in a way that could positively influence the outcome, verbally coming to my defense, and if possible, walking me away to safety. these are all great. I don't want allies, I want accomplices. Thank you. So somebody who is really going to work with you and interrupt the dynamic and feel like they understand the oppressive situation and can stand with you in the oppressive situation. I really appreciate that. And I think that all of us want to make, when we're in these situations, the idea behind us as bystanders, we want to make the situation better, and we're going to give you a kind of a spectrum of things that do that. But I really appreciate that, and it's also important to know that socialization can get in the way of what our body knows, but in these moments, our body can also tell us a lot and tell us a lot of information that can help us to be supportive. Appreciate you sharing all of that. All right, so the goals, Lori, go ahead.
So yeah, when we talk about bystander intervention, we have a couple of goals in mind as are shown on the screen. So one is to reduce the harm in the moment. And we do this usually by making your presence known. That's a really important part of this. And another is to show an alternative to the observer. So I think a really important thing here, which has really helped me when I think about this, is that the activity that's happening, the harassment, you may not be able to stop it. There are things that you may not be able to stop. But remember that the harasser is not and the person being harassed are not the only audience. Your audience is also all of the people standing around and people looking on. So you're demonstrating with your words, with your behavior, with your presence that this kind of behavior is not acceptable, and you do not find that acceptable, and you're going to make it known. So even if it's not, your intervention is not able to actually stop the behavior or harassment in the moment, we believe it's really important to still speak up and still say something, because you're demonstrating to more people than just the ones involved in the situation that what we stand for and what our values are and what kind of community we want to live in.
Great. Oops. And I think, and I think that's a really, really important point, that we're both doing this for the person that's being harassed, but also to change the sense of community and to change the environment and to have a sense that people will stand up for each other. It's a really, really important part. So these are tips for intervention. And we're going to do a little practice, although we're not going to unmute you all, but we're going to respond and get a feeling of this in your body. So really important to be alert and to scan your environment, like being on your phone, being like focused on your phone and not paying attention to your environment makes it harder to really be able to be present for other people. So really watching, paying attention to what's going on around you. Again, notice how your body is responding, and really listening to that. And if you're feeling tense about a situation, there's probably something going on that's worth at least paying attention to, if not interrupting. It's important to remember to breathe and take a breath and to say no, and to really be willing to, and I think this is a really big key, because we're kind of socialized to think this is not my business, to walk by some situations like this. We're socialized to not think that it's up to us to interrupt. And so it's really important also to sort of have a visceral sense of, no, I am going to interrupt. And we'll practice that in just a second. And if possible, you want to go into a situation with a buddy, and that may be that you're traveling with somebody who's a buddy. It may, but more likely you'll be alone. And what this means is that you like scan the environment and look to see if somebody is noticing what you're noticing, make eye contact with them, and try to bring in an ally to support you in whatever intervention you're going to do. Those are really important. So right now, I know that we're not all going to hear each other, although I hope Lori and you'll hear us. I want you to like root yourself in your body and just say a really big no. So take a breath, and then whenever you feel like it, say no. 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 It's really impactful when you have a room full of people saying it, but I think it's a helpful thing to just practice. All right. So now we're going to go to the do's and don'ts. This resource on our website. I think it's the most viral page right now. This is going around everywhere. People are using these tips, and I think that they're pretty solid, and they're not so many that you can't keep them in mind. But I think they're really solid. Go ahead, Lori.
Okay, so for our, and I want to acknowledge that there's been some really good and stimulating comments that are happening in the chat, and I think that we will get to some of those questions, and there'll be good chances for many of our participants here to chime in, because there's been some really good questions. In terms of our just sort of general, our list of do's and don'ts. Do make your presence known. That's part of what bystander intervention is all about, that there's someone else watching. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes just alerting the crowd or the harasser or whoever, sometimes just alerting people to a presence of someone watching is enough. Certainly not always, but sometimes. If possible, you really want to try to discern what are the, you can't always do this, but you want to try to figure out what does the person who's being harassed, the target, what do they want? So try to make eye contact with them. Try to ask either with words, eye contact, body language, what kind of, do they want support? What kind of support do they want? You may want to move yourself near the person being harassed, and or depending on the situation, really try to create a barrier between the person being harassed and the harasser. There are several of you in the intro who mentioned, you know, just a physical presence could be a very powerful statement, and could be what's needed in the situation. If it's safe to do so, and certainly with the consent of the person being harassed, you'll want to consider filming the incident. Of course, we've seen how viral these videos can go, and what an impact it can have when you are able to capture the situation. I think we'll go on to the next one. Lucy, I think, yeah, we can see some.
Here we go. So another do is to take the cues from the individual being harassed. Is the person, are they engaging with them or not? So are they trying to interrupt what's happening to them themselves? And are you going to be able to support what they're doing on their own behalf? You can also make suggestions. Would you like to walk with me over here, move to another train car? And sometimes you can say for him to leave you alone, and then follow their lead. So it's really important that always the person that's being harassed is centered in your intervention, and that you're not, that as much as you can, even if you can't talk to them, you're taking your lead from what they're doing. And this point about if they are trying to intervene on their own behalf, supporting them in that, that's a really, really important thing to keep in mind as we go through the scenarios. And to really honor that. And then after the incident is over, it's really important to offer some kind of some care, or to know that you're still there with them, and that they can talk to you, or you can process together, you know, some kind of, so that you're not just like intervening and then leaving. So that's a really, really important principle, is to follow their lead and to center them in the whole thing.
Finally, we certainly want everyone to remain safe, so do keep both of you safe. And someone else had mentioned keep an eye on where exits are. Yeah, let's go back for a minute. I think that's a very important point. Someone has asked to explain the tone policing from the previous slide. So yeah, let's go back and do that. I think that's important.
I'll go ahead. So what it means is that somebody who is being harassed may you know, they may yell back. They may do something that you wouldn't necessarily choose to do. They may swear. So but if they're intervening on their own behalf and resisting what's happening to them, you don't want to be coming to them and saying, oh, well, why don't you quiet down? You want to support their own choices about how they're intervening and trying to stop what's happening to them. So I think it's a really important thing. There's a video that we thought about sharing, which has gone viral recently, which is a woman, the police were harassing a man who is homeless, and a woman comes in support of him, and he lies down on the ground because the police tell him to, and then he wants to get up, and she says no, stay where you are. Like, don't, it's not worth it. It's very, very supportive what she's doing, but she's doing a little bit more intervening and telling him what to do than maybe you might want to do. But I think it was in that case effective. So, and Rebecca says tone policing also happens all the time to women of color particularly. So it's really important that these things are often the person who is being harassed will be from a targeted group. And that kind of tone policing is something that's very, very common. And you don't want to be participating in that. You don't want to be reinforcing racist ideas in the midst of trying to stop a racist act. So what Rebecca says is, like, don't don't get loud or tell them to calm down. Those things are really important not to do, because they're figuring out and intervening on their own behalf in the way that is right for them, and you need to be there to support that and not try and get them to do something different. So do you have anything else you want to add to that, Lori?
I think you and Rebecca did great. That was yeah, okay. Absolutely. I think it's hard for us because our hard as the intervener, it may be challenging to look at a situation in which we would handle it differently and think, oh no, but if you only did this, then you'd have a different outcome, which isn't necessarily true. But I think that Lucy emphasized it really well. You know, we want to be supporting the person as they resist in their way. So to finish this part up, again, assess your surroundings. You want to do what you can to keep both of you safe. If you have children, again, that changes the dynamic. Every situation is going to be different. You know, you can also try to identify, are there ways that you and the person being harassed can move to a different space. So, let's see. Let's move on to the next one.
Okay. This is yours.
I think this is actually my favorite one. So there are lots of different models of bystander intervention out there, and most of them have identified a number of Ds for the different ways that you can respond. So I'm going to talk a little bit about and give a couple examples of each of these, and then ask for you all to share more ideas in the chat box. I like the 4 Ds because I think it's easy to remember. And when you are in those spaces, when your anxiety ramps up and there's a challenging situation, it's hard to remember all what were the do's and the don'ts of bystander intervention. But for me, I am better at remembering the 4 Ds, which are direct, distract, delegate, and delay. So direct is pretty self-explanatory. It is responding in a very direct manner to the aggressor, or sometimes physical intervention if necessary. So you are actually stepping right in. You might be getting in between. This is what I think we think of when we think about bystander intervention. Is someone actually, physically getting in between the aggressor and the target. But it might be something also like if you see cat caller or something, maybe just going up to them or a street harasser and directly saying, hey, stop that, or whatever. So do you all have any more examples of what direct intervention might look like? Looking for examples of a direct. This is sort of what you think of as intervention. We're gonna go. No, there you go. There's a very direct one. What the hell are you doing, man? Yeah, step right in. Hey, what's going on here? You're calling attention to that situation. Yeah, great. Those are good ideas. Good suggestions, examples. Yes, just saying stop. And when we do this training in person, we do have an activity where you're trying to call attention to the incident that's happening. Stepping in front of the one being harassed, talking directly with him or her, with your back to the harasser. Absolutely, I'm really glad someone raised that, because you are drawing your attention to the person being harassed, not to the harasser. Oh, would this make your mom proud? Yeah. You could ask, is everything okay here? What's going on? Go sit or stand directly next to the person being harassed. You could say, boy, that sounds pretty racist or sexist or homophobic. Someone shares a story. I went and sat next to a woman on a streetcar who was being harassed. Others moved closer to her to the point where she was essentially surrounded by supporters. Right. Great. So those are all good examples of direct intervention. Another one that I really like to share is the intervention of distraction. I like to talk about this one because I think a lot of people who think about the concept of bystander intervention and are very, they're very maybe shy or not comfortable with the idea of being so direct or in your face, or people say, oh, I could never do that or whatever. But distraction is a really great tactic because it doesn't necessarily require that kind of direct intervention. You could do something to distract either the harasser or the person being harassed by derailing the conversation with something completely unrelated. You could go up to someone and ask for directions. You could spill your drink on them accidentally, or not even necessarily on them, maybe beside them. You could pretend you know one of them and interrupt the interaction by saying, hey, wait, don't I know you from somewhere? So do you all have any other ideas of how you might use the element of distraction? Ask for the time, sure. Just go up to someone, interrupt what's going on. You could also try to create a distraction somewhere else that calls the attention of the harasser or harassed person. Ask, where do you catch the bus? Point at something up the street. Yes, all of those. Do something funny. That's great. That's great. So I'll go through the others quickly. We'll spend less time on those. Delegate is the next one. That essentially is working with, bringing in a third party, working with someone else who may have more authority or power or more perceived authority or power, to collaborate with them on how to intervene. That may be bringing in a store manager if appropriate, or the bouncer at a club, or the bus driver, bringing in any of those people to actually try to find ways that they can intervene. And then the last one is delay. And Lucy had mentioned this previously, but it's really, if for whatever reason you can't intervene or you don't get there in time or something like that, this is an opportunity to check in with them after the fact to still provide some support, even though the incident has already happened. So, yeah, I think those are our 4 Ds.
Great. So we're also going to tell you about the don'ts. There aren't that many, but they're important. So the first one is don't call the police. So communities that are experiencing harassment, Muslim communities, Black people, queer and trans folks, immigrants, the police can cause a lot greater danger for the person being harassed. So I'm sure you've seen videos of police being called in the cases of some mental health issue or even domestic violence. Or there was recently a story about a man, a security guard, just in this last week, a black security guard who stopped a mass shooting of a white person and somebody who was going to do something, and the cop showed up and killed him. So it's really, the police are not going to provide safety for people who are being targeted. And white people, we as white people are trained to think of them as protectors, but it's really, really important that you not do this, that this reinforces the kind of military presence that in some ways the police is, and it is very, very likely to put the person that you're trying to support in more danger. So we're very firm about that. And the only time you would ever do this is if the person harassed asks you to do it. And even then you might want to talk to them about it. But it's really, really important that you are aware of the context of policing in this country right now and what might happen if you bring the police in. The second is don't escalate the situation. The goal is to get the person being harassed to safety, not to incite further violence from the attacker. So there are some strategies that will be more direct, but you may want to choose some others that are less direct in order not to escalate the situation. Again, take the lead from the person that's being harassed. If they're doing a direct intervention, you want to figure out a way to support that. But the idea is at this moment, is to get the person to safety, and not necessarily to start an altercation, like not to start a fight with the person who's harassing that actually makes everybody less safe. So that's a really important principle. The other is don't do nothing. So this is a very strong principle of this training, that silence is very dangerous, and that in this time when there is so much racist violence happening, it communicates approval of this system. And next week, the Proud Boys are coming to Philadelphia. They're a overtly white nationalist group, and they're coming to Philadelphia. There's going to be a protest, and that kind of violence is escalating quite a bit. So you don't want to leave the victim high and dry, and you don't want to communicate approval for what they're doing by not doing anything. And you may think, oh, well, I'm not going to do the right thing, all those things that came up at the beginning, but it's really important that that even the small thing, even being there after, if you can't figure out what to do in the moment, even being there for the person who's being harassed after matters. Paying attention, using your phone to record something. Any kind of presence really does alter the energy and alter the situation. So we're very clear that we think silence is very dangerous, especially at this time, and it creates a context in which violence keeps growing. So if you find yourself too nervous or afraid to speak out, move closer to the person and communicate support with your body. All right, we're going to watch a video. Let's see if I can get over here to this. Here it is. So I'm going to go back to the beginning. This is a video that was also created by the People's Response Team.
The United States has a long history of violence against people of color, disabled people, Muslims, immigrants, and LGBTQ people. In our current political moment, white supremacists and white nationalists have been emboldened, and as a result, public attacks are on the rise. Many people aren't sure what to do if they witness a racist or transphobic attack. Here are some ideas. It might be tempting to look away out of fear or because you aren't sure of what to do. But not getting involved communicates approval and leaves the victim high and dry. If you can, talk with the victim. This is about supporting them. Look them in the eye, check in with them. Try not to escalate or provoke the perpetrator. Simply sitting or standing next to someone is better than nothing at all. It's difficult to witness any kind of violence, so try to breathe and stay present. Many assume others will document an incident going on. If it's safe to do so and the victim doesn't object, film or record an incident. This helps to keep track of the rise of incidents like this, and it also ensures that the victim's versions of events can be confirmed. Check in with the victim. Ask them what they need. Get their consent and offer concrete ways to support them. Get them water. Help them get composed. Help them call a friend or even get to a safer place. Armed police presence often escalates rather than reduces the risk of violence in a situation. Because police have been trained to see people of color, gender nonconforming folks, and Muslims as criminals, they often treat victims as perpetrators of violence. So if the victim hasn't asked you to call the police, do not, I repeat, do not call the police. The culture of white supremacy and anti-blackness is perpetuated by our media, political systems, and social media. You can contribute to making these attitudes unacceptable by challenging white supremacy even when you're not in a crisis. If you're white yourself, talk to your white family and friends about anti-blackness and white supremacy. Do it every day, especially when you're in an all-white space. By doing this, you confront the culture without putting anyone else in danger of an immediate backlash. Now is the time for all of us who believe in justice to come together. It doesn't have to look one way. You can canvass, you can phone bank, you can write letters, or you can even create art for the movement. Taking it to the streets is always nice. But if you don't have time for that, you could always support the marginalized populations who are on the front lines of this work financially. White supremacy and anti-blackness affects all of us, and fighting against it affirms all of our humanity.
Yeah, I think that's a really important and strong video and reinforces like all the things that we already said. So now we're going to practice. Do you want to, Lori, do you want to take some time and address some of the questions before we move into the scenarios?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I think there's been some really good questions that have come up. There was one that came early on. Someone shared, I'm a big guy. I don't know how to respond if the harasser is a woman. And I've heard this question come up many times in different trainings. So some of our panelists, some of our participants may have information to share about that. I know I can share that. I think, of course, it depends on the situation. And again, I think that's why it's really important to take the lead of the person. You don't want to be perceived as if you're trying to come in as a savior or as a perceived aggressor either. So I think I think it's important to be calm, to just try to make eye contact with the target and check in. Can I help you out? Is there anything you need? Do others have suggestions for that situation?
Rebecca says, big dude, just jump in anyway. I think it's like how, yeah, this gentle presence says a lot. Like you may be a certain size, but how you show up and the energy you bring, it makes a difference.
Mm-hmm. Someone else suggests it if possible. Yeah, take calm, warm interest, ask what's going on. Invite the person to join you. Oh, okay, oops, I think that's responding to the scenario.
Oh, yeah, we're gonna do the scenario in a minute.
I think those were some great suggestions. There is another one. This is a tough one. If someone asks, is it ever okay to counter with violence? Lucy, what's your answer?
So when I hear this one, I always think about Steve Chase writes about in an introduction that he did to Quakerism about not being a pacifist, and it's because he supports self-defense as a Quaker. And so what I think about is I think that you want to use as many like non-confrontational techniques as possible, and de-escalate as much as possible. And there may be a situation where you actually do need to stand in the way. I mean, the safety concern is really important, but you may want to stand in the way and actually actively get in the way of what's happening. Now, that's a choice that you would be wanting to make. And I think of that as very different from actually meeting violence with violence. I think of that as intervening in a self-defense kind of way, not as like not exerting violence in order to stop it. But I think it's a very, very important thing. Again, the techniques we teach are a lot more about de-escalation and trying to get the person away to safety, because the risk that you have if you're very, very, very confrontational is escalating the situation and actually making it worse. So I think it's sort of a both and you have to judge those situations really carefully.
Yes, and it's going to be a personal decision for everyone. If you're a pacifist and you will not, I'm a pacifist, I will not respond with violence. But I think Lucy, and there's some of our participants have shared really different perspectives. But I think how Lucy described it is perfect. We're trying to give you many tools in the toolbox, and hopefully there'll be lots of tools.
There was another question, which was about whether we'd actually had experience doing this real time. Do you have examples? Do you have stories, Lori?
Well, I think there's lots of little examples that are more like, I guess I would consider them more like microaggressions, like standing behind someone in a line at a drugstore and having someone in front of me, another white person, say disparaging remarks about immigrants or about black and brown folks, ostensibly because I'm a white person and would share their view. So, I mean, those kinds of things, sure. I mean, I've responded in those moments. I have not had a more serious interaction in which someone was possibly going to be harmed that I had to intervene in. So there's certainly lots of small examples. I will share, I think, Lucy, this one is one that you know as well, but a really interesting example that's one of our colleagues that came after she participated in one of the trainings was just shortly after she participated in our training. She went home and took the public transportation, took the train home, and there was I believe a homeless man who had been harassed, and she remembered the techniques that she had learned in the training and actually used the delay tactic and checked on him and went and made sure he was okay and checked in with him. And Lucy, I don't know, you probably remember more of the details of that.
It was the next day, actually, and she saw this homeless man being robbed. And she wasn't able to keep him from being robbed, but she stood near him. She got other people to participate. She got the person who had robbed him to go away. She stayed and made sure and stayed with him until he felt okay. So she really did use all of the techniques. And then another colleague had kind of a domestic violence situation that she used all the techniques in the next couple days after she got trained and used that. I have not interrupted this kind of overt stuff, but I've done a lot of interruption of microaggressions, attitudinal stuff, things that people say, and this training has helped me get sort of more robust in doing that. But I'm ready. So I mean, I think that's really important, and I've heard a lot of stories about other people have used it. So
I just want to really quickly, somebody just mentioned, Lucy, I'm here, that it's very rare to have other white people step in or their ideas for that. And I think my only suggestion for that would be if the folks who are participating today and other people who participate in this training, if you are a white person and are able to intervene, you're setting an example for other people, for other white folks to step in and do the same. So I would just say that if people can step up and intervene in whatever way you can. That is also providing an example, and will encourage others to do so.
And we also, like, you know, the standard, or the image for white people of white nationalism that's being perpetuated right now. It's really important to counter that, and to be showing up as a white person in a really different way from somebody who's either not saying something, or you know, being vitriolic in your comments, but to really show up and demonstrate that you're willing to take risks and to really stand in the way, and interrupt things that are going on. So I think it's a really important thing. The other thing is that that's an invitation to talk about social location in terms of these interruptions, and interventions, because somebody who's a person of color may not be able to intervene in the same way that a white person. And my coworker Kenyatta, who used to be a coworker friend, Kenyatta James, who's Black, he was standing in line in TSA, and he saw a white male TSA agent really harassing a Black woman. And so he didn't go and try and intervene, but he did see that there was a Black TSA agent, and he went and he said, you know, you need to go pay attention to that. And so this Black TSA agent intervened. So it's also really important to keep in mind social location, and white people are more likely to be able to do things and say things and intervene in more direct ways in these situations than people of color, or trans people, or people that are generally more targeted, or Muslims, or people who are Jewish right now, right? So it's really important to think about where you sit in this, in terms of privilege, and to use your voice, and to use the way that your body is perceived to stand in the way. So somebody says, is showing compassion for the aggressor ever appropriate? So we're going to take this question, and then we're going to do the scenario, so we have enough time for them. For example, you seem really upset. It can. I think it can. I mean, I think it really depends on the thing. But the really important thing is to center the person who is being harassed, and not to center the harasser. It's really important that you're focused on keeping that person out of harm's way, and not on trying to change the harasser. And so it's really important not to turn your focus over much to the harasser, but to really keep your focus on keeping the person who's being harassed safe.
Okay, Lucy, do you want to move forward with the scenario?
Yeah, let's do it. But I want to just bring your attention to this comment. I commend white people who care and intervene. I'm a minority myself, and that is right. The outcome will just not be the same if I intervene. And so it's really important to pay attention to that. So we're going to do a scenario, and I'm going to call the people who volunteered. So we need 2 people for this. So I'm going to ask Pedro and Cecilia to be the people who are acting as one as the, let's see, I'll let you choose. One of you needs to be the person who's being harassed, and one of you needs to be the bystander. And then Lori is going to be the aggressor in this situation. And I'm going to read the scenario. So this is an example of verbal harassment on the train, where the person being targeted appears uncomfortable and unsure of how to respond. So this is a more low-level example, and then we'll get into ones that are a little more challenging. So you are riding on the train, it's crowded, and notice a man muttering slurs and threats under his breath towards a younger person of color near him. You are nearby and notice there is more room on the other end of the train car. What do you do? So Cecilia or Pedro, you want to unmute yourself?
Hi.
Great, Cecilia. So Cecilia, which would you rather be, the person that's targeted or the bystander?
I'd rather be the bystander.
Okay. Pedro, are you okay with the one being the person that's targeted in the situation?
Yeah. Can you hear me? I lowered my volume.
Yeah, we can still hear you. Great.
Okay, very good.
All right. So Lori's going to be the harasser. And so I want you to, like, in this moment, obviously we're not going to be able to see you, but to really think about how you respond to what Lori's going to do, and Cecilia, how you would intervene. So go ahead.
I am so tired of people like you. You're You're not in school. You don't have a job. Where are you going anyway? Just probably out to just cause trouble. I read about people like you in the papers.
Hey.
Broken home, no guidance. Hey, did you even pay for that train ticket?
Yeah, I paid for it. What are you doing on this train? You shouldn't even be here.
Hey,
You're just taking up space someone else could use.
hey, how are your? Where did you get those shoes? I really like those. I've been trying to find shoes
My
like
shoes?
that. No,
My shoes? Well, they were on sale, but
So Cecilia, see if you can figure out how to get Pedro to safety.
Could I show you this map over here for a minute? I need to figure out where my stop is. Right over here. I need to get off near.
Hey, you're the problem here. You people are just the problem.
Yeah, well, maybe I'll join you. You want me to help you with the map?
I'd really like it if you would kind of help me figure this out, because I'm not sure where to get off. That would mean so much to me. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that might be a good idea. Since this person next to me is such a
I would love to do that.
horrible.
In fact, maybe we're getting off at the same stop. Are you getting off there too?
Yeah.
I'm done with you people. I'm
Great.
Okay, great.
And
All right. Thank you.
We're done with you. How are you all?
All right, thank you. See, Lori has the hardest job. Nobody wants to be the aggressor, right? So tell me about that. So Cecilia and Pedro, why don't you start by telling me how that was and what your experience was like? Pedro, why don't you say, did you feel supported?
Yes, when Cecilia suggested that I help her with the map, I thought that was a good way to diffuse things. Although I personally have never been harassed, and I'm not sure exactly how I would react, but it is very intimidating to have someone, total stranger, coming at you.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's a
very
difficult thing to deal with. I never really thought about it that much.
Yeah. Cecilia, what did you think about your experience?
Well, it was a great surprise, because life is not exactly like the card on scenario 1, where you're expecting someone's going to mutter slurs and threats. Instead, it's really out there and in your face, and they don't pause so that you can get a word in. And I think it might have been a little bit easier in person, because on the train there would be other people there, and it would be easier to get up and just move over there and turn into Pedro and start talking to him and ignore the person who's, because this is about using your body. That's the one thing we can't do here.
Right.
That changes the conversation right there by entering into this thing that the perpetrator is thinking is a two-person, nobody's seeing us, nobody's going to do anything.
Right. Yeah, so it's harder to see. How did it feel to you, Lori?
Well, I don't like saying any of those things, so my deep apologies, Pedro. I thought that the interventions were great. So this, even when you're expecting it, like the shoes thing totally threw me off. So, that was great. It was just surprising, and then it just diverts your attention. You have to think about that. Like, what are you talking about, my shoes? And then I thought the follow up with the map was also really great, because you sort of did both things. Like, you distracted me, and then you were able to divert the target to get him away to a safer place.
I have to confess, I forgot to say stop it, and I was asking Pedro where he got his shoes.
I wasn't sure. I guess that's again one of the bad parts about not being able to see each other or interact in person.
So here's people starting with some other ideas. So Chris says, invite Pedro to the other end of the car. And then Lloyd says, as an intervention, I once saw people start singing, and all of us chimed in, and all of a sudden there was a spontaneous choir and the attacker just left. Singing is a really, really good tool in your toolkit. I've heard of so many times when singing was used and really, really effectively used to intervene. So, and now obviously it's very nonviolent, it's very surprising, like what's going on? Are these people more crazy than I am, right? So I think that that's a really good one. I'm a short white female and 65 years old. If the target is a teenager or younger, I would probably say, hey, sweetie, there is more room and seats back here. Want to move back here? With my body language suggest I'd accompany them to the less crowded area. Again, this is, I think, a really good technique. You have to be very sensitive about, again, about social location, and if the person is going to be really receptive to that. This is probably the person who's being harassed, where you really do want to create some sense of connection with them before you would move in to make that suggestion, so they feel like they understand it as a friendly suggestion. But that's a really, really good one. Yeah, very much, very appreciated. Thank you very much for Pedro and Cecilia for being willing to jump in.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're gonna have, I think we need, can't remember if we need 2 people or 3 people at this. So again, Lori is gonna be the aggressor. So Marty and Ted, if you can unmute yourselves, and we'll get started.
I think we need 3 people for this
We
one,
do need
if
3
we
people.
have 3.
So let's do Marty, Ted, and Rebecca. Are you willing to be in this one as well?
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. Great.
Okay.
Great.
All right. Right.
So what we're going to do is I'm going to read this, and then we'll assign your roles. So this is public verbal abuse, where the person being targeted is responding assertively. You and your friend are walking in a crowded shopping area, and you overhear yelling. You stop and notice that a man, perceived to be white, is shouting aggressively at an older black woman, including telling her to get a job. She is yelling back and pointing her cane at him, telling him to leave her alone. What do you do? So Rebecca, what role do you want to play in this one? So the 3 roles are the woman that's being shouted at, and then 2 friends who are bystanders together. So Ted and, I'm just going to assign you roles. Ted and Marty, why don't you play the bystanders? And Tara, are you willing to play the black woman who's being shouted at?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, is this Tara?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, great. All right. So you're going to be the person that's being shouted at, and the other 2. Are you all ready?
Yep.
Okay.
So Lori's the aggressor. Go ahead.
Okay. Hey, lady, why don't you just get out of here? This law isn't for people like you.
What's your
Don't you have
problem?
somewhere else to go?
Stop that.
Thank
That's
you.
awful.
What's
That's
the problem with that? I'm just calling it like it is. I'm just saying it like it is.
Very unkind. That is
Thank
not
you.
the way to speak to anybody.
Well, she probably doesn't have any money anyway. Just get a job. Start
Tara,
contributing
would
to
you
this society.
like somebody to stand with you?
Yes, please.
Great.
Could
I'll
we-
stand with you
Just
too.
so tired.
I'm glad that you're here. Shopping in the shopping center. We need more people shopping here.
Thank
Yeah.
You people aren't even any better than she is. I'm so tired of all you people.
Well, you can go on.
Make America great again.
Here with her.
I don't mean any offense. I'm just a little bit down on my luck now.
Yeah, that
I'm
happens to
sorry.
all of us.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
What do you? I don't see what you all think you're going to do here. This is
I'm gonna-
sorry.
I'm
you
gonna-
had such a
I'm
bad
I'm going to stand in front of you, Tara, and keep my back against the person who's abusing you, and tell me what's next for you today. You going home?
Yeah.
Want some
Would you
company?
mind walking with me down the escalator and then to the
I'd be happy to.
That's great. We'll walk with you. I'd love to do that.
I don't have
Let's
time
go.
for all you people anyway. Just
Oh, good.
mooching off the system.
Bye-bye.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. All right, so how did that feel for you, Tara?
Scary, and also I felt the need to explain myself because maybe something of what they were saying was a little bit true. You know, if you're homeless and somebody's or down on your luck. And if somebody's pointing that out, of course it's true, and you already felt bad about that to begin with. So that was kind of unusual to feel like I had to protect myself. I felt really grateful that there were people around me and willing to step in on my behalf.
For the bystanders, what was it? How was it like for you, for Marty and Ted?
My initial nerves kept me from jumping in immediately, but I got to it.
Yeah, the very beginning was the hardest part.
Yeah.
Sort of, you felt disoriented because of this, what was going on, is that?
Yeah, kind of disbelief and
hard to know how to start.
Yeah, that's usual, and it's okay to take a minute to sort of assess the situation before you intervene. So how do you, like, so I want to, like, I think that, like, given the way that Tara was responding in this moment, the things that you all did seem really appropriate. But I want to read the scenario. It says that this guy is aggressively shouting at an older Black woman, including her, telling her to get a job. And she is yelling back and pointing her cane at him, telling him to leave her alone. So she is actually taking action. And Tara, you may not have noticed that part.
I didn't.
And so this is based on a real situation that from the People's Response Team encountered in a shopping center where they found there was a Black woman, who was being verbally harassed by a white guy, and she was shaking her cane at him, and she was doing her own, trying to stop it. And so what they did is they didn't like come up with their own idea. What they did is they just stood next to her and they yelled with her at him. So they were actively supporting her in her choices about how to intervene in the situation.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
And it made a huge difference that she did that's what they did, that they were like stood with her. This one was harder because Tara didn't see that part. So she wasn't acting that.
I wish I would have kind of gotten a little bit more aggressive and maybe tried to hit him over the head with my cane and then
right. Yeah, she might not do that. She might just shake it. But I think that this is an example of countering the tone policing. So bystanders may be like not as comfortable with this way that the person who's being harassed is intervening, but this is an example of like setting aside that discomfort with the way somebody else is doing something and fully supporting their intervention. And you can imagine that a Black woman with two white people standing next to her yelling with her is going to be pretty effective in interrupting this kind of thing.
I did find that having a partner with me gave me more courage. And the aggressor was doing a lot that deserved getting yelled at.
Yep. Okay, great. We're going to go on to the other one.
I think that's one piece that I don't think we had in the dues, but I think that's a good point, that having somebody else with you, it increases safety. It helps you to be able to bounce ideas off. Sometimes when we do this scenario in person, when there's, a team of bystanders, then they can even divide up, and like one person may attend to the harasser and one person may attend to the harassed.
I can see that.
So I think that's a great point.
So somebody said, please get used to being discomfort. Practice doing what is right despite feeling uncomfortable. This is really key. This is really key to all of this. This is really key to ending white supremacy. This is really key to intervening in racist acts. Like, get the comfort of walking by somebody, the comfort of being in your own world, the comfort of not saying what's hard to say. Those are all things that we need to get used to, and really get beyond and take action. There's a question, tone policing. What if a woman in a domestic abuse situation is yelling at her abuser? He'll just get more violent. Again, like, if she's getting support from people who are walking by, that may not be the case. I mean, it may be and of course you have to be, domestic violence is something to be very, very mindful of. It's very, very, very tricky. But it may not be that would be the case. And again, it's an issue of like supporting them. But it's very important to use your judgment and listen to your body and figure out what the right thing to do is in a situation. But again, you don't want to tone police the victim. And somebody says, after all,
and it's also just,
go ahead.
It's just also following the lead of the target. If
Exactly.
In that situation, if a woman in a domestic abuse situation, she may not want you to start yelling. I mean, you just have to, that may be a situation where you have to communicate with her and say, hey, do you need a hand here? Can I call somebody? Is this jerk bothering you? Can I help you out? But it may just be a situation where you just really need to communicate, find a way to communicate with that individual to see what they need.
And Anne says that that actually, if you don't intervene, you'll have a lingering sense of discomfort when you could have done something. So that's an important thing to point out. So I'm gonna show you all 5 scenarios that are in this training, but we're only gonna do one more scenario. But I want to just read this one to you, very just the top part: a verbal altercation that's escalating between 2 people that appear to know each other. This is kind of like what would happen if this is in a domestic violence situation or a domestic situation that's getting tense. So this is an opportunity, if you do this training yourselves, to practice this kind of scenario. The 4th is a physical attack. You're leaving a party and you notice that several people who appear drunk are shoving another person who seems non-confrontational, also unable to get away. What do you do? This is a chance to really practice de-escalation and trying to get the person away from the situation. Again, you can practice this on your own. So we're going to do a situation involving the police next. So Rebecca, it sounds like you're, oh, and then it says, I've interrupted a woman being abused in a park who was yelling back at the man and screamed to stop, and she was grateful. The man turned his attention to me for a second and was shocked someone interrupted him. Great, thank you for sharing that story. All right, so I'm gonna see if Cecilia, for this last one, we need somebody who is the person being harassed, the homeless person. We need somebody who is the store manager, and then we need a bystander that's willing to intervene. So I wonder if Pedro and Cecilia and Tara might be willing to do this again.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. All right, great. So I'm going to read it. You and a friend are walking home past a 7-Eleven and notice 2 police officers harassing someone who appears to be homeless and telling them they cannot sit on the sidewalk. You also observe that the manager employee of the store is watching the situation. What do you do? Cecilia, will you be the homeless person?
Yes.
And Pedro, will you be the store manager?
Okay.
And Tara,
Yeah.
will you be the bystander?
Okay.
All right. Okay, so are you ready? Think carefully about the situation. Yep, and then Lori's going to be the harasser. Okay, go ahead, Lori.
Again, I'm just going to be 1 police officer, not 2. Hey, you! Get out of this! Get out of here! We've told you before to get out of this area.
I'm just here for a minute.
No, you're always bothering the customers. Just move it along, you lazy bum.
Hey.
You can't sit here.
Hi, this is, I'm going to sit down next to you here and see if I can help.
I'm sorry, who are you?
My name is Tara Gardner, and I'd like to know what this person has done wrong.
Yeah.
Well, they're just sitting in front of this store, clearly impeding the traffic into this store right here. I mean, I'm sure the manager doesn't want that happening. No one can get in. It's a traffic hazard.
All right.
A pedestrian hazard.
Are you okay? Can you walk? Would you like to, maybe if you just move down a little bit.
I can walk. I want to get away.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's all best for all concerned if the police, back off and let this person move on.
So you're saying you're okay with these people sitting right here in front of your store?
As the store manager, no, I'm encouraging the person harassed and the person helping her to move on.
Could I come inside?
Well, you want them to move? Yes, and if they're going to give you any problems, sir, I'm happy to take them down to the station.
No, they're not causing any trouble. I just don't want any trouble in front of my store. And the quicker that the young lady and the person helping her move on, the better things will be.
Okay.
How can I help you?
Can I go into the store for a minute until the police go away?
Sure, that's it.
And then we can walk somewhere else.
Yeah, come on in.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to keep an eye on you because if you steal anything, I'll be sure to pick you up and take you down.
Okay, great. Thank you. So here it says the police officer would say to the bystander, it's time for you to move on. There is nothing here that concerns you. If you don't move on, you're going to be in trouble. The police would not be as polite as Lori. Yeah, probably that's right. So this is a trickier situation because police are armed and they have a lot of state authority behind them. So it's important to keep that in mind. So let's talk about what happened. Which of you was being targeted? Cecilia, you were being targeted?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So how did it feel? What kind of support did you feel was happening in this situation?
I was so grateful when Tara came and sat next to me and sort of spoke for me because I had absolutely no power and there was nothing that I could say that the police would be able to hear. So I was glad that she was sort of physically with me and verbally speaking, verbally she was in between me and the police. I was very grateful about that. And what I really wanted was to get away from the police. So it was great. I was a little afraid when Pedro, you were so gentle and so sweet. But when you told me also to get away from your store and the police were telling me to get away from the store, it made me afraid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was a little bit conflicted because I thought to myself, maybe the manager is the one that called the police in the first place.
Ah.
So I'm not sure exactly what my role was since I was just looking on. But the only thing I could think of was separate the two parties.
What I was secretly hoping for was that you and Tara and I could go into the store and close the door on the police officers and they would go away. And then I could go back out with Tara and walk somewhere safe.
So Tara, how was it for you really briefly?
I felt very comfortable sitting down next to her and being able to speak to the police officer. And I felt that she was really within her rights to be sitting there unless she was actually blocking the door. And I've actually seen a situation like this where I didn't take action. And the situation was a bunch of really young, I guess we could call them travelers, were sitting off on the side in a shopping center. And a young police officer was being horribly rude and abusive and telling them just to move on, get out, and that sort of thing. They took the situation into their own hands and weren't going anywhere. So they didn't really need interference from me at that time, I hope. But I thought afterwards, I wish I would have just gone and sat there to see what was really going on and how I could be of help.
So there's a couple things with this one. I think, so you're looking at systems. So first of all, I want to Rebecca said something really important, that she had a friend of hers who was a Black woman try to help in a situation and she ended up getting arrested. Who froze? Did I freeze? Can you hear me still?
Yeah, keep going, Lucy.
Yeah, so the situation in this case, so again, thinking about social location and who's doing it and who could get, who especially around the police could be more targeted is really, really important in this situation. The other thing is that you have a power situation. It's possible that the manager did call the police on this person, but you as a bystander could have a role in intervening like I want to like affirm what you all, the choices that you made, and there could be a way to work the system. So to bring the manager and to test whether the manager could become an ally, or through your pressure as somebody who's like maybe a regular customer, for them to turn into somebody who's actually supportive of the homeless person. So that you go and you say to them, look at what the police are doing. This isn't okay. This shouldn't be okay to you, that somebody on your property is being harassed. Can you do something about it? So even if they did call the police, you might get them to shift their tone, but you're also telling the manager that even if they did call the police, that's not okay. So that's one piece. The sitting by them and being in solidarity with them is good. I like the idea of like, let's go have a cup of coffee in the store, because that kind of could disarm the manager. That was a really interesting idea in terms of like, wait, this person is now a customer of mine. You know, they may have hostility to them, but they're accompanying somebody that they want to be a part of theirs. So this one is, it's really important to think about the power. So the manager has some power. And if you can get them to ally with you or pressure them to, that could make a difference. And these situations with the police are very, very sensitive, as Rebecca points out, so horrifyingly, that like people who try to work in concert with somebody can often be targeted and end up with the police. Again, recording things can be really helpful. And what Rebecca said is that there is a recording and it doesn't matter. That's really important to think about, that there have been so many recordings of police killings of Black folks, and the killing of Black folks hasn't stopped. So it's really important to think about all of that as you do this. But very nicely done. Thank you for our volunteers. We need to finish in a little bit. So I want to just end. Are there any other questions? Oh, what can we legally do when the police is involved? So you can do all of the things that they did, you can do. You can't push them, you can't, do things like that. What you're able to do is going to be limited. Lori, do you have a longer answer to that question, or more information about that question?
Let's see.
What you can legally do in the police?
I mean, the most important thing I think is that you can film. One good resource for people to be aware of, and I can put it in the chat here. Some people may already know about it, but the ACLU has a program, and I think it's called different things in different states. In North Carolina, it's called Mobile Justice, in which you can actually film incidents. If you download the app, you can use it to film incidents, and if something happens to your phone, your phone is knocked out of your hand, or it's confiscated or whatever, the video automatically uploads to the ACLU's website, or not to their website, but to their servers or whatever. So that's a resource that people are often interested in. Right. So there's that, yeah. And I think one of the biggest takeaways from this is just to be creative in all that we do, to use all of the tools at your disposal, and be creative and look around and see what other people can, how other people can support you, and continue to use your creativity as you move along.
So Eileen asks, so it's 9:30 and we have you for 90 minutes. We don't want to keep you forever. Eileen asks, what if the harasser is drunk? And we don't have time to talk about that, but if you want to reach out to me or Lori, I'll put our emails in here, and you can ask us other questions if you like. And then there's one more thing I want to show you. So she put in ACL Mobile Justice. So all of our bystander intervention resources are at afsc.org/bystander intervention. The webinar that we did before, and we'll post this one as well, is there. All of the tips for bystander intervention, the video that we shared with you is there, and the training manual is there. So all of these resources are there. The 4Ds are there. So there's a couple of articles about bystander intervention. So take a look at that, and I hope you all will use it, and really, really appreciate you all being here, taking the time for this, trying to skill up so that you can really be present for people in your community that are getting harassed, and go and use what you've learned. We really, really would love for you to do that. So So we want one more poll. Will you intervene the next time you see street harassment? So we'd love to have a sense of how well you would feel, ready you would feel to do it based on this time. And let's leave that for 1 minute or 30 seconds, and then go ahead and show the results. Rebecca says, white people in this webinar, please tell your friends to stand up for us. That's a good thing to end. So, and then we'll look at the poll. Okay, great. Very likely and more likely. And a little bit of not feeling ready. If you're not feeling ready, go and use more of the tools and learn some more. But I'm really grateful that many of you feel much more ready to do this. Thanks for joining, and thanks for your willingness again to be a part of this. And good night.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.